Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Breakdown with Birkenoff. Now, this is a live stream on YouTube and Twitch, and hopefully some other platforms like Rumble and Kick, if those are now activated. They should be, but you never know with technology. So, this particular episode is an extension of our Spin the Wheel series that I started a couple days ago, or maybe on a Sunday or a Monday. I don't exactly remember at the moment. And it is going over each of the Libertarian candidates, which there are six in total, and kind of looking at their policies and then their most recent debate that happened in Georgia. Now, it's possible when we get towards the end of our candidates that are on our wheel that I'm about to show you that we will have a more current debate than the Georgia one. And we'll probably end up watching that current debate and not this Georgia one here. And then after these live streams are finished, I'm probably going to do some videos over each of the candidates that are more kind of condensed than these more like research kind of discoveries. Now, you already know who the candidate is if you've looked at the title of this video, but if you did not and you just clicked and didn't bother to see what you're clicking on necessarily, I will tell you here. We're going to be mentioning, you can give some drum rolls, and I might as well show you on screen as well for those that are watching live. And this one will be uploaded as a podcast as well, like my other one I did on Mike Tarmat. And he's a rather interesting candidate, and you can definitely check that out. But I don't necessarily want these videos to be too long when I release them for my YouTube channel. Okay, so that's why I'm still going to have it as a podcast. This is kind of a mini series within that podcast, right? So if you are listening to it, you don't necessarily need to see the video necessarily, but I do need these as a live stream as well because the videos can be helpful in this case. And so that's why I'm doing that there. And that's why I'm also going to be downloading, or not downloading, but also going to be, well, now downloading it as a podcast as well to be consistent with that. And then hopefully, just as a general update, I will have my podcast uploaded to Spotify and Apple and all that other stuff on Thursday. So you can start looking for Thursdays as being the day where you'll see the podcast being released. Now, if you kept doing drum rolls that whole time, your hands are probably pretty tired. But if you did not, we can do the drum roll officially now. And our candidate is Lars Mapstead or Mapstead. Okay, that is who we are going to be going over for today, Mr. Lars. Now, we're going to start it the same way we did before, and we are going to check out Mr. Lars' website. So we're going to go right on over to his website. Now, I'm going to bring this over for those who are watching this as well, and we'll keep it at this screen view for now, but we are going to scroll on down here and we're going to read on the homepage of his website, and we're going to read a couple paragraphs about Lars. So here we go. Lars Mapstead is a tech entrepreneur, road racing enthusiast, and 2024 Libertarian candidate for president who grew up in poverty, living out of a small barn in Big Sur, California, until the death of his grandfather in a hit and run accident. Bounced around from relative to relative, he overcame alcohol, drugs, and inconceivable odds to found and co-found multiple companies, including Friend Finder Networks, Fupa Games, and Legendary Speed. As Lars built his businesses, he has watched as an election after election, third parties and American voters are being silenced. Americans are being forced to vote for the same two parties and nearly the exact same candidates over and over again. Lars is running for president in 2024 to unrig our economy, our election system, and our criminal justice system, and to ensure every American has a fair chance at achieving the American dream. So that is kind of the how to, so to speak, of Lars Mapstead for his systems. So we are going to just scroll down to the end here where we have a video, and this kind of slogan of his campaign is unrig the system. And what does he want to unrig? He wants to unrig the economy, unrig our elections, unrig healthcare, unrig criminal justice, and unrig the government. Okay, so we're going to dive into each of those based off of his campaign. All right, so we're going to go to his video. Now, those who are watching live, I'm going to change our screen here for a second so that we can make sure that we are going to be able to hear the audio for those that are also hearing the audio as a podcast as well. So, regardless if you're watching live or watching later, we want to be able to understand and hear this audio. So, this is directly from his homepage, where he's going to give a little bit of an introduction to what to expect as Lars. Okay, what does Lars have to offer?
If I say the system is rigged, that brings up something in your mind. Maybe it's education, maybe it's the economy, healthcare, something like that. Everybody has an idea of why the system is rigged, and it's causing division in our country, because when you don't feel like the system is fair and equal, it agitates you. They'll tell you how to run your life, and then they'll completely do the opposite thing. No, there's no accountability. And when you start putting
And those who are listening to as a podcast, he's having a bunch of clips throughout this video that are kind of demonstrating the points that he just said. So the point about them telling you one thing and doing a different thing, since he does live in California, he was showing Governor Newsom during COVID when he had that exclusive wine dinner. And even though you first weren't even supposed to be around people unless you were 6 feet apart, second, you definitely weren't supposed to be in a public gathering spot. Third, you weren't supposed to have a lot of people, which kind of hints why you couldn't be in public, and blah, 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 and blah. So that's kind of what he's showing throughout. And we'll just let the video play on, and we won't want to interrupt it too much here.
Putting this whole picture together, it feels overbearing that the system is so rigged. What can we do as people? Congress is not doing their job so that they don't have to be responsible when things are falling apart. Part of unrigging the system is to start chopping away at this bureaucratic state to make them do their job.
So one of the things that I think would fix some of the problems is term limits. And I say, if you haven't figured out how to do your job in 12 years, you probably shouldn't have the job in the first place.
Our whole election system is rigged. We need a whole overhaul of our entire election system. I never planned to enter politics, but witnessing our government becoming increasingly authoritarian and hypocritical, I could no longer idly sit by. If you're ready for bold action, support me, Lars Mapstead. If you're fired up as I am, I ask you to join me at lars24.com.
So that is his main campaign video, as I've already mentioned and as you obviously have heard. Now, the big takeaway I've had from here, at least personally, is the idea of term limits. Term limits as a topic is something that is always kind of been in the system before. Like, you always hear about it, right? It's something that is the first time you've ever heard of it. That's not what term limits are. Everybody's heard of them, and everybody kind of has a general thought about them. Now, the big thing about term limits in general is I think everyone is more supportive than not supportive about term limits, right? Like, I don't think I've ever really talked to anybody that was like, no, I think the idea of term limits is bad. Everybody's kind of for it. Now, where the argument comes on if, term limits will ever happen. Personally, I don't necessarily know if term limits will ever happen, because it's kind of like the whole idea, essentially, of if you're the one that's in charge and you have a steady job and so to speak, why would you make something that then is going to ultimately uh, like remove you from your job? Like, in other words, if you're, a fast food worker, let's say, for an example, and you're in charge of this fast food restaurant, you're not going to make some law or some bill or some requirement at your job that's eventually going to make sure that you have to leave. If you're an engineer, same thing. If you're a teacher, same thing. If you're a nurse, same thing, right? Whatever profession you have, you're not going to want to sign something or make a law or make a policy that is ultimately going to have you be removed. That just doesn't particularly make sense. So, personally, I really like the idea of term limits, but I don't necessarily know how practical they are as a general idea. Now, as president, you wouldn't be able to have an executive order, so to speak, and that could potentially uh, do good, right? You could potentially do good with that, but that's not necessarily getting into the weeds on if executive order should be used, because as a libertarian candidate, you probably wouldn't necessarily want to do too many executive orders, right? That probably wouldn't be too good of an idea. That kind of goes against the whole idea of the Libertarian Party in some ways, right? Okay. So as I was saying just before, he's got several different sections to his main campaign: the unrig elections, unrig economy, unrig healthcare, unrig criminal justice, and unrig the government. I also want to mention here, regardless of where you are listening to this from, YouTube, Twitch, as a podcast, or whatever, in the description of wherever you are listening, you are going to see links that I have used also for this video. So if there is something you want to look more at that we looked at or we discussed, you can use those links to do so. That is why they are there. And this is all, again, from his main campaign website, so nice and easy to find. All right, so we have clicked on his first policy: unrig our elections. Let's see what he has to say. Our elections are rigged. Ballot access rules prevent independent and third party candidates from running for office. Gerrymandering and redistricting allows politicians to choose who votes for them. A lack of transparency makes it hard to know if your vote is counted. If we want to bring back trust in our elections, we need a free and fair election system. My solution to that is a Voters' Bill of Rights. The Voters' Bill of Rights takes our federal election system from one with different systems to regulations and rules that have allowed the Republican and Democratic parties to control our elections to one that is accessible, transparent, and trustworthy. This ensures that every voter in America can trust our voting system, know that their vote is counted, and that those in office are truly representative, are truly. I don't know why I can't say that word right now. Of people who elect them. Representative? That doesn't sound right. Let's just say the people feel truly represented. So this ultimately comes down to if you think that elections are fair or not, right? Do you think elections are fair or not? Because depending on your viewpoint on that is probably your general concept or your general idea about what you think of this main policy he has here, regardless of reading why he thinks so and why it needs to change. Now, there's the general idea of election fraud, and then there's the general idea of election rigging. And I think that Lars is particularly talking about election rigging. And what I mean by that is he has more of a focus, not necessarily with bad, or potentially bad, I should say, voting machines, but with the process of how we vote, such as the gerrymandering. But generally, I just want to throw out the idea, depending on how fair you think elections are, it's probably going to determine your thoughts on this particular issue. But let's read here. He's got a couple different subpoints within this main point. So let's read what he has to say. Every voter has the right to participate, and then he has a little bit about that. Every voter has the right to fair districts. He has a little bit about that. Every voter has the right to transparent elections. Every voter has the right to access the vote. Every voter has the right to secure elections. So that is his big points within there. And he also has a little bit more over each of those subsections, but he seems to have, from his overview, we kind of understand where he's from on about the elections. Not particularly a focus on uh, like election fraud necessarily, but more of a focus on how elections are done in the first place. He kind of wants to change that just a bit, but not necessarily like a complete overhaul, because I didn't see anything like about how right choice should be used instead of, outright renter or anything like that. I didn't see any of that, but more just the process of it. Okay. So, or his next point, or his next major point is unrig the economy. So let's see kind of what he has to say about the economy. Now, economy is obviously, anybody that knows anything about the Libertarian Party is going to know that that's always going to be a major point for regardless of who that Libertarian candidate is. That's always going to be a major factor. And you got a whole bunch of different caucuses or viewpoints about how best to go about it. But generally, as a libertarian, economy is always going to be a major topic. So to see that here is not surprising. But let's see how he wants to go about it. That's where we could get into some changes from him to, say, Mike, who we covered a few days ago, or to any of the other people who are on the stage. Our economy is rigged. The government gives banks and corporations bailouts and tax loopholes, while the cost of groceries, gas, and other homes goes up. It's time to reignite the economy and ensure prosperity for everyone. So his first way of doing that is by canceling the bank's credit card. The government gave an unlimited credit line to banks. Then it paid the banks to keep the money out of the economy. Your grocery bill, gas bill, and rent skyrocketed. The most important way to unrig the economy is to cancel the bank's credit card. There is no more rigged system than a Federal Reserve. While Americans get thousands of dollars in checks, corporations and banks rake in trillions from the Fed, driving the cost of your groceries, gas, and homes through the roof. Worse still, the Federal Reserve pays banks billions in interest every year to keep that money out of your pockets. Unrigging an economy means ending this off the books bank bailout and ensuring if Congress wants to bail out the country, it goes to all Americans, not just banks and corporations. I'm going to go ahead and finish out what he has to say here before I provide some of my first insight from this topic. So he's got 3 more kind of bullet points on this. Cancel the bank's credit card. When our founders created the U.S. Constitution, they explicitly prohibited the states from offering lines of credit, similar to states that banned the federal government from issuing any future credit through the Federal Reserve or otherwise, restricting it to borrowing directly from the American people. Stop paying interest to banks. Stop paying interest to the banks. Draw down interest payments to banks to 0% over 1 year and cancel the interest on the reserve balances program to stop the never-ending bank bailout. And his third bullet point, end the Fed, shut down the Federal Reserve, end America's secret bailouts to banks and corporations, and roll any regulatory and statistical activities managed by the Fed into the FDLC. Okay. So he's got there. Obviously, from what I mentioned just briefly, every libertarian is going to have a lot to say about the economy, and the idea of ending the Fed is also pretty standard. Now, the part that I like the most about what he's talking about here is the part about the groceries and gas and homes cost and things like that, because really when it comes down to who the candidates are going to vote for, or not candidates, who the people are going to vote for, it ultimately comes down to the bottom dollar. If groceries have gotten higher over President A, they're not going to vote for President A. They're going to vote for the new guy, right? They're not going to want to have to keep paying a lot of money for their groceries or for their gas. So a lot of people vote just simply based off of that. So I do think that that is a good point. And the idea of that they should stop getting bailouts is also something I very much agree with. You're not going to really see me arguing too much back against what I saw there. So, not too much more to add besides that I generally agree with everything that I did read and his idea of his 3 bullet points of a possible solution to fix it, right? Now, his next point about the economy is the energy race. China, India, and Russia are racing to be the world's energy superpower. We must beat them. Energy is the new space race. The country with the lowest cost of energy will have the lowest cost of living for its citizens. Right now, China, India, and Russia are leading this race. China is committed to building 150 nuclear reactors in the next 20 years. India and Russia are fast developing industry let's reread. India and Russia are fast developing energy infrastructure to take over the United States while the US lags behind. So his idea is to do that and to because obviously this is going to come down to the money. That's why it's in the economy section. So if you're going to cut one thing out, where are you going to get the money from, right? So that's kind of comes the idea, or I should put that really the opposite. If you're going to add something like this, where you're going to vastly want to increase the energy, it's going to have to come from something else. So it's going to come from these 3 points he has here. In the wars, unleash energy potential and energy race bond. So how is he going to end the wars? We need to end our endless wars overseas and make a one-time interest payment in American energy research to explode American innovation. He's going to release the energy potential by having energy regulations on institutions and individual energy production to enable every American to participate in the energy race. And then for the race bond, he's going to do a tax free bond where Americans can invest in an energy race and have parts of the profits. So essentially, he seems to be wanting to open the energy to the free market, but also restrict the government's not oversight, maybe the wrong word, but the government's impact in order for him to do so, right? Okay, his third one here, one tax code for everyone. And that's obviously going to come down to needing to abolish the IRS and stop taxing income and then eliminate all tax loopholes that the federal government has currently. And he has a little bit more information on that, but that's not necessarily something that sticks out to me. Now, if that's something you want to read further on, you can just go to his website that is linked, or you can just simply search Lars24.com to read more on that. Now, his next point was unrig healthcare. So let's see what he has to say about this. Our healthcare system is rigged. The entire healthcare system is built to take dollars out of your pocket and send them to private insurance companies, hospitals, and drug manufacturers. The government protects its healthcare monopoly by subsidizing these companies and limiting your choices to them. We need to empower citizens to make their own healthcare choices and get the care that's best for them. Okay, so how does he plan to go about this? Healthcare for individuals and families is his first point. Insurance companies and our federal government control your healthcare. Outdated regulations hurt our doctors and reduce the quality of your care. Hospitals ignoring price transparency leads to surprise medical bills in your mailbox. It's time to empower you to make your own choices. Healthcare is the only industry in the United States where you don't have where you don't know the price before you buy. As a result, Americans today spend up to 35% of their income just on healthcare, over 2x what they spend on food. While health savings accounts have empowered some Americans to pay healthcare bills directly, they are still tied to your insurance company and your job. And hospitals nationwide have been outright ignoring transparency laws, leaving you with the bill. Unrigging healthcare requires empowering you to choose how to spend your healthcare dollars. eliminate the regulations harming doctors, and enforcing our existing transparency requirements. So, how does he plan to do that? By expanding health savings accounts, by eliminating unnecessary regulations, and enforcing existing laws. And then he's got a little bit more to each of those. I'm going to read the last one with enforcing existing laws. HHS passed a rule in 2021 requiring hospitals to post their prices publicly, but it has largely been ignored. I will order the HHS to withhold federal funding from any provider that is not transparent with its prices, so you have the information you need to choose the best healthcare for you and your family. Okay, so healthcare is a major topic. It's a topic that I've kind of started to become interested in because I really haven't had to be too concerned about it in my life so far, right? I'm pretty much fresh out of college and I haven't really had too many health issues in my past. So it hasn't really needed to be a concern, really, until recently. Not that I've had anything health wise come up, but just starting to pay more attention to it. And uh, knowing what I know a little bit about the healthcare through uh, people I know and whatnot, it's just a total mess. So the idea to help and fix healthcare and to come up with a solution is something that I think a lot of Americans are going to share. Now, how going about doing it is something I'm not super familiar with, and that's something I personally want to look more into to come up with some ideas, some points of how healthcare could be improved. But it seems like such a massive topic to even start to understand. It can kind of be a little bit overwhelming when it comes to or the best approach to take for it. Now, it's a potential video idea, but that's kind of besides the point there. Okay, let's see. He's also got healthcare for Medicare and Medicaid enrollees. So I'm going to read this one as well, because like I said, this one's kind of interest to me. So we're going to just see what he has to say, and we'll read the bullet points, but we're not going to get too much in the weeds. And you can pull up his website if you want to look at all what he has to say about this, but we're going to read kind of the main parts here. The federal government is America's largest healthcare provider, but the quality of care for people relying on the programs is terrible. The cost overruns from those programs are out of control, and the lack of transparency means we don't even know how our money is being spent. The federal government funds nearly 40% of all healthcare expenses in the United States. Yet, for the people on Medicaid and Medicare, among many other healthcare programs, long waiting lists, missed appointments, and low quality of care harm people reliant on these programs. Sweetheart deals for insurance companies and medical conglomerates ensure that the cost of these programs are out of control. Numerous agencies track all federal medical spending, so it is impossible to know just how much it costs and where adjustments can be made. And then it's got the points down here. Create healthcare debit accounts, launch healthcarecost.gov, reducing federal healthcare spending. So if you like any of those bullet points, you can read a little bit more on what he has to say about those. But we're going to move on to the next one. That's probably the topic that is of most interest to me, and that is unrigging of the criminal justice. Our criminal justice system is rigged. A never ending federal drug war puts millions of Americans behind bars, with no effect on drug overdose and crime. Prosecutors, judges, and police are protected from the accountability faced by citizens. The federal courts are so expensive and powerful that no citizen stands a chance. Unrigging our criminal justice system means ending the federal drug war, enabling citizens to hold government officials accountable, and bringing fairness back to the federal courts. So he wants to end the federal drug war. I'm going to skip the introduction section and we're going to read his bullet points this time. And yeah, he wants to end the federal enforcement of drug war by doing this. The war on drugs is a failure and must end. I will immediately order the Department of Justice to stop enforcing the federal drug war and stop purchasing all drug investigators, cases, and sentencing. Excuse me. Then I will work with the stop pursuing all drug. Oh, hang on. I went backwards. Then I will work with the Attorney General, our international partners, and Congress to deschedule all drugs from the Controlled Substances Act. Next one. This next bullet. Undo the damage of the drug war. Ending the drug war isn't enough. We also need to fix some of the damage done. I will pardon or commute the sentences of anyone federally convicted of any nonviolent drug offenses. Then I will work with Congress to expunguate to include all nonviolent drug offenses by supporting the REDEEM Act. Finally, we will encourage governors to adopt similar policies with regards to state enforcement. And that's going to be a big thing as well with the state enforcement, right? Because it all comes down to individual state rights in a large way. The less the government can become, the more likely it is to succeed necessarily, right? That kind of makes sense. At least in my brain, it does. But it ultimately comes down to the idea of the drug war and your personal perspective on this, right? Some people like Ron Helton, that was when I was making videos regularly, he would sometimes hop in. I don't know if he's still there or not. We'll have to see. But he is very big on the drug war and thinks that everything about it was wrong, right? That the way the government went about trying to reduce it just led to more, and it just was a total disaster. But then you have people that I also know that are very much, I guess you could say, for the drug war. I don't know if "for" is necessarily the right phrase. Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure that I have this up here and it looks like we're good. Just wanted to check on that. But yes, so it kind of depends on your perspective. But any independent, why should it say any independent? Any libertarian voter is going to say that the drug war was a bad thing and it needs to be ended. I don't know the percentage of independent slash libertarian voters that would be for the idea of kind of like how Oregon has done it with their drug laws, right? What's it called? Decriminalizing or making more available access to all drugs, including more of the hard drugs, so to speak. It's kind of an interesting idea there, and I think we read that part. No, we just read that first one, I think. Yeah, I think we just read that first bullet point. We'll read here. Undo the damage of the drug war. Ending the drug war isn't enough. We also need to fix some of the damage done. Our partner commute the sentences of anyone federally convicted of any nonviolent drug offenses. Then I will work with Congress to expand. No, I think we read this too, but I'll go ahead and read it just in case. To include all violent drug under the REDEEM Act. Finally, we will encourage governors to adopt a policy. Yeah, we read that. We didn't read this one though. In federal drug war funding and redirect to rehabilitation. Finally, we will shift as a nation from treating the drug war as a criminal problem to treating it as a medical problem by directing a federal control budget of $41 billion to support state, local, and nonprofit SAMHSA block grants for rehabilitation moving our nation's priority from insurrection and punishment to rehabilitation and recovery. So that was a big viewpoint there. Take a quick drink break there. So this is an interesting idea. I don't remember who it is exactly, who some country, who is doing this policy. It's not Oregon, I don't think, that has this policy. It's a country elsewhere. I want to say somewhere in South America. Let's see if we can't search it up here. So we're going to come over here and we're going to search it up. And you can kind of see here, if you are watching it live, this is a potential video idea I have. Well, based off a video idea. I don't know if we're going to do it or not, but we will see. Now, what was I saying? How are we going to search this here? Country that allows all drugs with a good rehabilitation program. Let's see if this will pop up. Looks like Portugal, according to just the first country that popped up. Yeah, it looks like Portugal's the country I'm thinking about. That kind of has this idea that pops up with drug decriminalization, but has a huge extra policy based on rehabilitation. So there's a strong emphasis on that. I don't want to get too bogged down on the weeds. That is something that we can search at a later point, but not necessarily on this video, for why Portugal's program seems to be working so much better than a program that that US currently uses or another country currently uses. But Portugal's idea seems to be working a lot better than an Oregon idea, even though they're doing the same thing ultimately, just with a different emphasis on rehabilitation versus just the idea of decriminalization, so to speak. Something like that. But it is something I would definitely need to research more into to be able to tell you, exclusively why the program appears to be better. Now, the next thing is ending qualified immunity. So that's the idea of mostly to do with officers. I think it also has to do with a little bit with prosecutors and other kind of fields in that area, but mostly here in reference to police officers, where they're able to do some terrible things, and they can't necessarily be blamed for it. Okay, so we're going to read his bullet point based off of this, and we're going to see and make sure that this is right. So he wants to passing in the Qualified Immunity Act, and will urge Congress to pass the End Qualified Immunity Act to eliminate this judge-created doctrine and ensure prosecutors, judges, and police officers can be held accountable for their actions. And that's essentially the idea of being able to take officers, judges, and prosecutors to court if they do something bad. And by having qualified immunity, the police officers are not as blamed as a lot of people feel they should be. And it essentially goes down to the idea, if you're able to do, whatever things you want to do and you can get away with it, the only way you're going to start to hold the industry, so to speak, accountable is by being able to bring them to court. That's kind of the idea about, if you listen to my podcast with the Senate hearings, there with the tech Senate hearings, that was a big point that some of the senators brought up, mostly through Lindsey Graham, even though he's a little bit he did have a good point in this case, I thought, with until we can actually send these companies to court, Twitter, Facebook, whoever else, or X, I should say, if what we can actually send them to the only way they're going to be held accountable is if they can be sent to court, right? And justify the actions that they did that way. Okay. Bring fairness back to the federal courts. So what is his solutions on this? End civil asset forfeiture, end federal overcharging, and hold prosecutors accountable. So let's see what he has to say about ending civil asset forfeiture. I will order the Department of Justice and Internal Revenue Service to cease all civil asset forfeiture cases immediately, return any seized property to their owners, and require them to file criminal cases against those responsible where they have probable causes, restoring the principles of innocent until proven guilty. His next point is ending federal overcharging. Overcharging is the process of piling federal charges on a defendant until the risk is too high for them to go to court, and then offering a plea deal for a lesser amount if they don't go to court. We will end federal overcharging by requiring a prosecutor to take the initial charges to court, encouraging proper charging by prosecutors, and reducing the penalty for innocent person to defend their inconvenience in federal court. So we're going to read this last one before I give my general thoughts on these. Hold prosecutors accountable. Finally, we will hold prosecutors accountable. If a federal prosecutor goes after any innocent person, their office will pay 2 times the attorney fees of the person they prosecuted, ensuring only the highest value cases get prosecuted and innocents are able to defend themselves, even against the federal government. So I actually have some big ideas or some big thoughts on this next one, or on this last point, I should say. It is a very interesting idea. So with this last one, being able to hold prosecutors accountable, right? That is his point. So, long story short, most of the time when a case gets brought to court, the prosecutors who are bringing the case think they're going to win to a large degree. Like, there's not a lot of just kind of frivolous cases that are brought. Usually, when a case is brought, especially if it's like a big time case and not something that like a speeding ticket or something that you decide to go to court for, we're talking about stuff that's more criminal in nature than simply that. Talking about like murder or things like that, they're only going to bring the case usually, right, if they think they're going to win. But the idea of increasing an attorney fees to 2 times or 2x is a really good idea, I think, because it will generally hold that standard to be even higher. Because it is known that there are a percentage of people that do make it to prison and through the entire judicial system do get voted on by the jury and found guilty because of whatever evidence was provided by the prosecutors and police and whatnot, and then later to be found not guilty, uh, either by DNA or just further evidence that then gets found or are released or whatever case, right? So there are a percentage of people that do face that. In making that percentage less by having a simple rule or law on the attorney fees and how much they're able to be charged, I actually do rather like that idea. You'll have to tell me in the comments, or if you're watching live currently, what you think about this idea. I actually like this idea, as I've been saying. You'll have to tell me what you think about it. Okay. So federal overcharging is the simple policy. I don't think that would be too hard to uh, to get rid of. Like, I think that would be something that is doable. But it is interesting to see what that would be based off of, right? So we're going to go ahead and visit his last point here, or his last major point of his campaign. And then we're going to go to this next website, and then we're going to get into our videos. If you are paying attention to the links, we're going to be skipping our next link, and we're going to go to the one after that, because that is an article that gives a little bit more background information, but I feel like we have covered it pretty well. But it is good to have any sort of extra information. So we are going to keep it there. But before I keep blabbering on, let's go to our next one, which is unrig the government. Let's see what he has to say about unrigging the government. Okay. Our government is rigged. Instead of serving the people, bureaucrats, politicians, and a president have protected corporation and isolating themselves from accountability. Unrigging our government means empowering you to hold Congress accountable in federal agencies and returning presidential powers to the Congress. So let's read a little bit more about this as an idea. So once again, I'm going to go down to his bullet points. If you want to read a little bit more about his insight onto why he thinks this is a big deal, you can do that by going to his website and picking whichever category. In this case, excuse me, it will be unrigging the economy. So his viewpoints here, or his main points here, is sorry about that. Okay. So his first one is pass term limits, enforce the Stock Act, unlimited individual contributions. So let's read a little bit more on each of those. Pass term limits, like he said in his campaign video. If you can't do your job in 12 years, you shouldn't be in office. I will pass the 12-year term limits either through Congress or by rallying the state via constitutional amendment. Next one, enforce the Stock Act. I'll immediately order the Department of Justice to start enforcing the Stock Act and insider trading violations in Congress. Unlimited individual contributions. We need to end the corporate controls of our elections. I will ensure that individuals can give unlimited amounts to the candidate of their choice to fight back against PACs and super PACs. So I like all three of those. As I mentioned at the start, and I don't necessarily want to be too repetitive here, but as I mentioned, the term limits, I'm not sure as an idea the government will ever pass on it as a law or as a rule, but as a policy and as something that should be done, I do think that it is of people's interest. It is a very good idea. Now, the enforcing the Stock Act and unlimited individual contributions also seems a rather good idea as well. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that either. Okay. So now he has rigging what is that word? In federal agencies. Let me think. Ah, we'll have to do this. Here we go. Let's see. I'm gonna have to my brain's not working right now. So let's do this. We're gonna search this here real quick. Let's see. Let's see if it'll do it. Nope, it's not gonna do it. So we're gonna come over here real quick. This is a good time for a drink break anyway. Privileges of doing this stuff as a live stream. But that's why we're doing this as a research video, so that I will know how to say these words when it comes time to the big boy videos that I'll be making about each of these people. That will be a lot shorter and a lot more concise.
We are looking at how to pronounce this word, as well as how to say more interesting and often mispronounced words too. So make sure to stay tuned and consider subscribing for more learning. How do you say it? Raining. Raining.
Raining. Okay. Let's go back. Reigning in federal agencies. Okay. Pass the Reigns Act, eliminate agency difference, and reform the Federal of Information Act. So those are his big things there. So let's read a little bit more about each of those. Why don't we? Pass the Reigns Act. Federal agencies consistently make regulations with massive impact and the Reigns Act and massive impact and little accountability. The Reigns Act will ban federal agencies from passing any regulation that has more than 100 million impact on the economy. Eliminate agency difference. The courts today have adopted a doctrine of automatically believing whatever a federal agency says in court and requiring the citizen to prove otherwise. I will order all federal agencies not to use an agency difference argument in their federal courts until the courts reject the principle of agency difference. Reform the Freedom of Information Act. I will vastly expand the ability to get information from federal agencies. I will vastly expand documents included in the informative disclosure, require mandatory payment of all attorney fees if a citizen wins a case, and freeze funding to any agency that doesn't respond to a FOLA within 20 days. Okay, then he wants to eliminate presidential power. So that's kind of another thing that I briefly mentioned. Obviously, as any sort of libertarian candidate, you're not going to want them to have a high percentage of power. That kind of goes against the principles of the party directly. So let's see his bullet points on this. Refuse to declare war without Congress. That's a big one. Repeal all national emergencies and repeal executive orders. So we're going to read on that first point. I will end all current authorizations of force and require Congress to declare war before engaging in military action abroad. Next thing, repeal all national emergencies. I will repeal all 42 currently active national emergency declarations and relinquish presidential emergency powers back to Congress. Repeal executive orders. Executive orders are supposed to be directives from the president to federal agencies. I will repeal all current executive orders that apply to non-federal employees, vastly eliminating the power of presidency and returning it to the people. Okay, so I like here the idea about them having to declare war first is kind of a big one, because that's generally the idea of if you can just kind of simply go to war the way we do now, it's obviously something of action, right? But it's not necessarily something that's going to directly be seen as war sometimes. So by saying it directly, you would probably limit the amount of wars that we would currently get into, or at least make it a lot more transparent, depending on the viewpoint you have on that. Because you could be very cynical and say it would simply just make it more transparent. Now, the repealing of national emergencies and repealing of executive orders, I'm also rather a fan of. All right, that was a mouthful. We didn't get too much into the weeds of Mike Tarmat's video as we did with Lars. His website is simply a lot easier to follow. I think Mike had a lot more videos, and we didn't necessarily want to click on all his videos. So having it in text is helpful in this way. Now, as I was mentioning before, this website here by Florida Politics was a really good kind of talking about Lars, and they got a few quotes about him and his strategy. And it also said in here that he was polling around, well, the Libertarian, or who the Libertarian would be, was polling around 1% at the time. And this was in October 21st, is when this article was directly published. And as a percentage, that's usually about what a Libertarian candidate does get. And just as a mark to put in your mind, if the Libertarian candidate gets 5% of the national, in the national, like, main presidential election, we get access to a lot of things, such as money and ballot access, given all across all the 50 states instead of having to go to war, so to speak. But went ahead and included this in the description, but we're not going to spend too much time on this article directly. But we are going to go to our next article. Nope, it didn't want to do that time. So let me come over here, and we're going to present this article so that y'all can see it as well. And this is on our candidate Lars, of course, as that is our focus for today. And this is a website called Open Campaign. And essentially, it's just a really good layout of what the candidate believes. And I'm not sure directly who fills this out or not. I know that, like, on Ballotpedia, for example, I believe it's somebody from the campaign or the person directly that fills it out. I believe that's the same here, but regardless of who's doing it, it's coming directly from the website, and it just has, clips or screenshots, or not screenshots, copied and pasted into each of these viewpoints, right? And so you have all the topics, all the big ones, and then you have some small ones, or not necessarily small ones, but all the big topics, right? It puts it all in one place, so it's very handy to have. So, for example, it's got abortion, and it says here under abortion, coming from his website, recognizing that abortion is a sensitive issue and that people can hold good faith views on all sides, we believe that government should be kept out of the matter, leaving the question to each person for their conscientious consideration. I think I said that right. So this is just a really good site that I like to have, that puts it all just into one section, one place you can look at, that gives you kind of the issues, and you can scroll to the one that that you favor the most as being important to you, right? Not that you necessarily want to be a one issue voter, or one issue voter, kind of like abortion can be sometimes. But anyway, it gives it all into one place. So it's very handy in that way. So another thing, like the death penalty, it says here we oppose the administration of the death penalty. We can go down to education and say that education is best provided by the free market. And he goes on to explain a little bit more. We know about energy. We can go to let's say, like LGBTQ rights. Libertarians embrace the concept that all people are born with certain inherent rights. We reject the idea that national right can ever impose upon others to fulfill that right. We condemn bigotry and as irrational and repugnant, and it goes on to name or go a little bit more into detail on that. So if you do want to kind of have everything just on one page, you can go to opencampaign.com and just search it there. And in the case of Lars, he has it filled out coming directly from his website. So that I thought was super handy for a tool to be used. Now, we are going to get ready to go back to our friends at the Georgia Libertarian Party to listen to Lars' segments in that debate. We are not listening to the whole 2 hour and 40-minute debate. We are only listening to Lars' bits on each of the debates, similar to what we did with Mike Termat. And as I mentioned at the start, this is more of a research video. I will be making more concise videos on each of these candidates for my YouTube at a later date. But currently, we're more in a research state to just kind of figure out who the hell these 6 people are, especially since I haven't even heard of most of their names before this. Now, before we go on to this video, I'm going to quickly get a drink before we start, but I will be right back. So you won't be hanging for too long. Go ahead and grab yourself a drink or get a good snack. Maybe even go to the restroom, whatever the case. It's all your decision to make, but I will be back here very shortly. We'll just go ahead and leave it up like this so that when we're ready, we can move right on. All right. Alrighty, like I said, it was gonna be nice and quick, and hopefully this won't be too more kind of ASMR. But I got this nice little Zivia is what they're called. I don't know if you ever heard of these, but we'll kind of go right here. They're like basically zero sugar sodas made with stevia, I believe, is the sugar it's made with, or the whatever you want to call that stuff. Anyway, supposed to be more healthy, but you'll probably know in a couple of years from now, and it will turn out to be the devil in liquid form or something like that, and be absolutely atrocious. But for now, it's supposed to be good. All right, so like I was saying before, we are going to be looking at the 2024 presidential debate from the Libertarian Party of Georgia, and it was done with Clint Russell as one of the moderators, and I forget the other guy's name right now. But he was in there too. So let's make sure that we can hear the audio. Yes, we can. Before I press this, let me go ahead and full screen it. That way it can be nice and good. All right, let's go back so that y'all can see it and I'm not just talking to the ghost. All right, here we go. So, once again, we're only looking at Lars's segments in this debate. We are not going to be watching the whole 2 hour and 40-minute thing because we will be here for probably 6 hours if we did that. And my longest stream was actually, this is a side tangent, my longest stream was probably last election, like presidential election. Was it that long? I think it was that long ago, and it was like an 8 hour stream. I did 8 or 9 hour stream. Let's just say that was way too much, way too much. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and see if we can't find our first clip with the introduction. Hopefully, we don't go too far here. That was just him introducing all the candidates. We can skip that. That was Mike, who was our last video was about. That was the joke. All right, here he is. All right. Looks like it is 1419. So we're going to go ahead and put up 1414. So we're going to go a little bit further back so that we can make sure we get all of his answer and we don't clip anything out. So let's just go a little bit back so that we can get all of his answer. All right, so let me know if you can hear the audio. You should be able to, but as you know, with technology, sometimes it cannot be your friend, and we want technology to be our friend.
Yeah, Brad, thank you so much. You know, I heard you say that you voted for Ron Paul, and I also voted for Ron Paul. And
Hang on, let's make this a bit louder. That way y'all will be able to hear it a little bit better. All right, so the first thing he said was about Ron Paul, and that he probably voted for Ron Paul because that one moderator, he mentioned that he was an independent voter. He has voted for a libertarian president before, or a libertarian candidate as president, I should say, before, but he doesn't always appear to have voted libertarian, so to speak. He's independent in nature. He's not just, libertarian or gold for everything, so to speak. But let's get his answer. And once again, let me know if you can hear it or if you think the volume needs to be increased.
Back in those days, I really thought that he could win and that we would have change in the country. I voted for Ron.
One more thing. I think we're on double speed. Unless y'all want double speed, we're gonna go back to normal speed right now. Because I was like, wait a second, why is he talking like a robot? Anyway, that's why.
Ross Perot too. I thought he could win and change the country. I never felt like the duopoly resonated with me and that they represented me. I've never voted for a congressman or a senator that has represented me because none of them have ever won that I voted for. And so I feel that disillusionment that you have. I feel that despair that we can't change anything in America, that the system is so rigged against us that we have no opportunity to actually create liberty for anyone. It seems oppressive, really. I mean, when you get down to it, and you can talk about the economy with the inflation that's crushing everybody, with the IRS that turns regular folks into criminals. You can talk about the rigged healthcare system, where it seems like the doctors are more caring about the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies than they are about the regular people. You can talk about the rigged criminal justice system, where they're throwing people in prison that shouldn't be in prison for crimes that don't have a victim at all. So I feel that despair. But look, everybody here has the power to unrig the system. You have the power to unrig the system. And if no one is willing to stand up and do it, it's never going to unrig itself, right? I need everyone here to unrig the system with me, to fight for liberty, to fight. We heard Spike Cohen today talk about the Hernandez family and the atrocity that's going on here in Georgia and how tough that is. We need to end this kind of government coercion. And if people don't stand up, no one's going to stand up. So it takes everybody to stand up.
I have a quick follow-up. I want to hear from Michael and Joshua on this, starting with Michael.
Okay, so that was his answer there, and definitely not bad, and especially after coming from his website. It was kind of interesting or funny to see his answer being basically naming off all his main parts to his campaign, which actually is kind of smart thing to do, right? You're yelling out or not yelling out, but yelling out, you get what I mean, your taglines for the campaign. And if that's something that interests you, you're able to attach onto that point, such as like the healthcare or abolishing the IRS. Obviously, anybody that's sitting in that building and watching these debates who is a hardcore libertarian because they went to their convention, right, is going to be against both of those issues compared to, say, an average voter that may think when someone says abolishing the IRS, think that the person is entirely crazy, right? You're speaking to a certain crowd when you're at these debates, and you're trying to win over those constituents to then get the bid for presidency from your party directly before you can even campaign out as the main dude, right? That's kind of important idea and something to keep in mind. What's also a little bit funny is I think the especially Clint here. I don't know about the other moderator because I can't really see his screen too big, but it looks like he has the same mic stand as I do. So that is kind of funny to me. The little things that you can find joy with. Okay. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and fast forward to our next clip that we have Lars talking at, and it looks like it was a follow-up. So let's hear the follow-up, and it was at 20. Let's hear this follow-up question, then we're going to skip ahead to his answer.
I know all of you guys want to abolish the Fed. I'm no fan of the Federal Reserve, but a poll from 2023, I believe it was Gallup, only 37% of Americans view the Federal Reserve negatively. 20% have no opinion on it, and whatever the math is, like it. So how do you get Americans to want to do something that they aren't even aware is a problem to them?
Yeah, I would tell them what the Fed is and what it does.
So we're gonna get to his answer on this. This is Michael Rechtenwald. We're gonna go ahead and skip along to Lars's answer because once again, he is our case study for today. I probably need to stop saying that because I'm gonna start to drive people crazy if I keep repeating myself. They're gonna think I'm going a little bit cuckoo.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that I'm a big 10th Amendment guy. I believe that the states have the authority to take care of their citizens.
Okay, so he didn't answer that. It went to somebody else. Now they're on the 10th Amendment. I apologize for that. But it is an interesting point that we can discuss a little bit here since we are on the topic on the Fed being observed negatively or positively by people, right? That general idea. So it is an interesting point, right? I think that's something that I was kind of just saying earlier. So I'm trying to think in like my life of the people that I directly know, people from my work, my family, my friends. Like when if I were to just go up to them and say, "What do you think about abolishing the IRS?" or "Give me your thoughts on the IRS," like what is their perspective going to be? Because I think the majority of people would say that the taxes are something they dislike doing, but ultimately they think that's part of the system of like what we have to do, right? They're just part of the deal, so to speak. They're just something that has to be done. But I don't know if they would necessarily go as far as to say is like completely disbanding um, the Federal Reserve or the IRS is something that should be done, right? So it is kind of an interesting point and something that I generally have put a lot of thought into because I'm still rather new into the whole idea of what the Libertarian Party is or exactly what it represents in a lot of ways. And the economy and the IRS and the Federal Reserve is a big point across really all of these candidates, and the idea of that it being kind of an immoral and bad, uh, not necessarily company, but bad policies, right? So we're going to hear his answer on the 10th Amendment. Now, Clint, one of the moderators here, asked this question about Texas having the right to potentially secede from the government based off of the border problems that are happening. But let's go ahead and hear his answer to this. If I can press the right tab. Here we go.
Citizens, and that government in general is better at a local level than it is at the federal level, that we should allow citizens to be governed by people that are closest to them because they understand them the best, right? And I often say the federal government carpet bombs people and the local government holds a gun to your face, right? But all of it is coercive. And so I think that the state of Texas should be able to defend its borders if that's what they choose to do. I don't think that a president should incite violence by calling for cessation of states, but I do support the right of states to move in that direction if that's how they feel fit, right? Because there should be a way to extract yourself from the federal government if the federal government is behaving in a way that's disadvantageous to its citizens. So I feel like the Constitution and the founding fathers set this up in a way so that we could address these kinds of situations in a civil manner, maybe without having to resort to bloodshed. I'm always on the side of less death, and so I would always try to find a diplomatic solution to the problems that we have before inciting violence across the country and having brothers pit against brothers. That sounds totally horrible to me.
Just a quick follow-up for you. It seemed as if you were insinuating that perhaps the federal government or the president is behaving in a way that is deleterious to the American people. Do you perceive that to be the case with the border issue?
30 seconds and follow.
Sure. I think that the answer that I gave was more just in general that a president shouldn't, not necessarily that this president should.
I know. I'm asking specifically.
Yeah.
Do you believe that is it a dereliction of duty what he's done on the border or no?
I think it's a dereliction of the entire Congress, not just the president, that they have given up on border security. They've given up on addressing the crisis at the border, that they both benefit from the crisis at the border. They like the chaos because it's a way of fundraising for them, right? They never seem to fix these problems over and over. You can name 50 problems that they haven't fixed. And the reason they never fix them is because they like pitting each other against each other so that they could get the money out of people's wallets. And I think that's wrong and needs to end.
Mr. Toad, go for it.
Yeah, so
That's the point I very much agree with. If you listen to my previous podcast, the one that came out the same week as I'm making this video, you'll know that that's also a stance that I have. So I very much agree with our friend Lars here on this point. Now we're going to move forward to our next bit, and we'll see what question he was answering here, as it looks to be about here. We'll say 39:30 on this time clip. All right, let's see what Lars has to say in answer to this question.
For selling libertarianism. And we must also recognize that
Right now, this is Michael
property
Rechtenwall. We're
rights
going to let
are
him
fundamental.
speak out, and then we're getting to Lars.
Mr. Mapstead, you have something to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, everybody in this room had some kind of immigrant family in their past history, whether it be Irish, Italian, whatever. And every wave of immigrants that has come over has been disparaged and been called the bad guy and been called the person that's going to steal the jobs from the people. And we've got to stop with this fear mongering. When I first learned of libertarianism, that was kind of a sticking point, because I was like, as a taxpayer, I don't want to give free handouts to millions of people that are coming over, but I also want them to be able to have a better life. And so my policy is essentially a three-part policy, which is that you can have a visa to come in just as a tourist visa, you can have a work visa, or you can have an immigrant visa, and we have to streamline this process to end the chaos at the border, which the government is feeding off of.
So I had one thing to add, and we'll go to the next question.
yeah, well, I just had a question.
I don't necessarily disagree with his point there either. But we're going to go ahead and move forward to our next clip. This one's going to be a little bit faster than our previous one, because we're not getting too much into the weeds as we were with our last one, talking about the moderators as much as we know who those were, because if you watched the previous one, you would. And frankly, we don't want this one dragging on for too long.
Order every single state that we have to go through and different rules that we have to follow, that creates complete and utter chaos. It's kind of the same thing that's going on at the border. If you go to California right now, you get stopped at the border of California and they frisk you to see if you're bringing in fruit or contraband into the system. And I've always thought that was a ridiculous statement. So we need to allow for freedom of movement and freedom of commerce in order to make things better. Look, it was said on the stage earlier that the immigrants are a net benefit to America economy. And so we need to embrace that and move that forward to make our economy grow.
Self-government time here, libertarian self-government. Let's have quick, we'll get two more and we'll get out.
So that was his answer there. I do think I agree a lot with what Lars has to say about immigration. And because we all know it's a big mess, and there's certain things that have to be done to improve that situation. I blabbered on about this a whole lot in my previous podcast, as I've already mentioned. I don't want to be too repetitive, as I've also mentioned several times already in our clips here so far. But you almost have to be able to fix the policy first before you're going to be able to fix the issue directly. So the policies that Lars is suggesting, are the general insights that he is suggesting, are something that I do think I'm generally in favor of, and I do think would improve the situation. So that is a good thing for sure. But we're going to go ahead and go to our next clip here.
There's certainly more important policy issues that we should be focusing on.
Fair enough. Mr. Mapstead?
Yeah, the criminal justice system is rigged, and it's time to unrig the criminal justice system. If we just focus on January 6th, we're doing ourselves a disservice. This kind of activity is going on in America in all kinds of people's lives. People are being punished for crimes that they didn't do. People are being punished for crimes where there's no victim. We need to end this. We need to stop having it so that there's plea bargaining, because the government is not even presenting their case anymore. They just use this rigged system to get most people to plea bargain out. So I want to make it so that if you are offered a plea bargain, you can see this on my website, lars24.com, under my criminal justice reform. If you are offered a plea bargain, that is the new maximum sentence that the attorney general can go, or the person that's going after you can reach, right? And that if they go after you and you are proven that you're not guilty, they owe you treble damages, because they shouldn't be able to just use the government to assault citizens and use the bully pulpit to assault citizens and make criminals out of people that are not criminals. There are many people in prison today, not just January 6th, who are suffering because of the oppressive, coercive criminal justice system that makes it so that you take the lesser of two evils. You take 5 years instead of the 40 years that they're probably going to get at you if you defend yourself. And everyone should have the right to defend themselves against the tyrannical government. And so that's what my criminal justice system does, to unrig the system, the criminal justice system.
So
Yeah, Thomas Mapstead has been.
Once again, I kind of agree with him here. I do think that the money system is a good way to kind of convince the government not to do so, because especially at that level of things, you're not ultimately getting into the huge money pots. You're getting more into an areas of government that you can control a little bit with harsher money standards, so to speak. Now, you don't want total government regulation and control, and that's not necessarily what he's suggesting here. But I do think you can hold them more accountable and at least have a little bit more of a consequence for when the system does go wrong. If you think about doing something twice, you're doing better than if you don't think about it at all. There's kind of a way also to think about it.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just kind of like trying to say here is, oppose the violence of the state here. They're terrible. Stop Cop City. Go join the movement.
Lars, do you want to comment on the grassroots or any of that?
Yeah, the thing is, like, when I was watching the BLM riots and I was watching the videos from those things, you could tell that there was insurgents embedded in those riots that were causing problems. And when you looked at January 6th, you can tell that there was groups of people that were embedded in there that were causing problems. Now, whether that was the FBI or private corporations hiring people to instigate things, or other political movements trying to push pressure on people. And I think that one of the things that I see is that the media is complicit in this. The media pushes this propaganda. They hide the truth from us. They give us a totally different narrative. You can see it all the time. If you're watching alternative media, if you're watching Clint's show, and Toad's show, Josh's show, any podcast or show, you can tell that the narrative is not correct, right? So I feel like what we have to do is rein in the mainstream media, because they have been co-opted by our government to push propaganda on us and gaslight us. And this is a major problem, because most people believe what the television tells them to believe, right? And so we have to come at them with our principles, loud and proud of our principles, so that people can start waking up. And I think that that's what this whole movement is about, is trying to educate people and let them understand that the government isn't your friend and it's out to harm you, really.
A quick clarification that there's actually surveillance footage that was being worn by, I think it was DCPD. So we know for a fact that there was at least 7 to 9 plainclothes DCPD cops, including some that were actively saying, let's go.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's pretty clear. I saw the footage too, and you can tell that that's the truth. And whether this is, a grand conspiracy or it's local, people trying to, push their agenda or whatever, but this is that astroturfing. This is co-opting different movements. There's lots of peaceful movements, and then you have 10 or 12 instigators that start smashing windows. And because of the mob kind of situation, it just gets everybody in a frenzy, and they start doing bad things that they wouldn't normally do if there wasn't people, doing bad things.
Quick from Jason, we'll go to Toad.
Yeah, a legitimate difference between a legit movement from the grassroots and the AstroTurf. Look at the Stop Cop City movement. Stop Cop City movement got 105,000 referendum signatures. People came together to knock on doors and legitimately make change. Who is the AstroTurf? It's the people supporting police, the Atlanta Police Foundation, because they're not made up of people from Atlanta. They're made up of Home Depot, Delta, Coca-Cola, and a lot of major corporate interests. And so they pump tons of money into the media, tons of money to the AJC and to the media to push that. Oh no, we really need.
Came out.
We're going to just go into our next clip. I don't necessarily think you have too much to add on those points there with the whole January 6th mess, but I do think I generally agree with the idea of holding them more accountable and having a little bit better of a system, because it doesn't ultimately really matter who the main issue was on this. Like, who was the main influence?
Out of a marketplace, and it was bats or animals or something like that, and then they were talking about how there was conveniently this laboratory 600 feet away, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the laboratory where they're experimenting on COVID stuff is probably where the COVID stuff came out, right? And unfortunately, the whole COVID thing to me was one of the greatest grifts perpetrated on the American people ever. And it might just be the government, but it could also be private corporations, because we printed $8 trillion, right? And we stole $8 trillion from the American people because of COVID. Like, whether all the other stuff that you believe or not believe, a lot of people would do a lot of bad stuff for $8 trillion, right? And the idea that we're going to somehow hold these people responsible, I wish that we could, but we have a Congress of both Republicans and Democrats who don't give a crap. You know why? Because a lot of that $8 trillion made it into their pockets, made it into their constituents' pockets, made it into the corporations' pockets, right? As president, I always believe that you have the right to decide what you put in your body. The government has no right to tell you what you should be doing with your body, as long as you're not harming other people. We should be allowed to make an informed choice. And unfortunately, our leadership, Donald Trump, and at the time, Cuomo was given tons of airtime, and they turned COVID into a political battle. They turned it into a partisan hack. And it should have been left up to the people to make their own informed decisions on how to do it. And the money totally rigged the system, and we need to unrig it.
Yeah, so at the beginning of this whole thing, if you said, oh, this is a lab leak, they called you crazy. And then in closed doors,
they spend trillions of dollars that we don't have, bury the American people. They are not friends of the American people. They are friends of the establishment. They are friends of the bureaucracy. We need to put an end to this crap for good.
I said that the DNC and RNC run our elections. I would argue that APAC runs our elections more than almost any other.
So let me do closing statements after this.
Before we go to Chase, I just want to say, I'm not asking you to tell me who you're going to vote for. I'm just asking who's better.
They're both terrible. You can determine who's, there's different factors. Like
Him facing 720 years behind bars potentially
Yeah.
would indicate to others that perhaps he is not. Why do you still believe?
Yeah, because there was pictures literally of him on the stage with Fauci, and they're both laughing, and he's pointing at a swamp creature. He went in there talking about how he was going to tear the swamp down.
He's talking about Trump here.
He surrounded himself by swamp creatures in every direction. Now you can say, well, he didn't know he was. Donald Trump is a severe businessman. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he was surrounding himself with. And to me, he is still doing his virtual reality show as president. And he just wanted to look good. So he brought in the people that he thought were the experts, and they turned out to be the swamp. So he embraced the swamp in my opinion.
Are you vaccinated, Lars?
I am vaccinated.
Do you regret it?
No, my dad almost died of COVID. He was on an incubator, and it was very close. And so I thought my wife also is compromised, and I thought, if I don't do this and I kill my wife, how would I ever live with myself,
Sure.
right? But I have always been 100% for it is your right to choose, and that no one should make that decision for you. And I did not get more vaccines because I realized that there was a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
I went with the information that I had, and the information that I had was
So we're going to trust people that can't see through a certain obvious.
90% of the people in America took a vaccine.
And that's what we want to lead us, one of those
7.
Just like Joe.
So the COVID thing's kind of a heated thing, and Lars started to get attacked a lot here in the debate. Probably not as much as Chase, because Chase is kind of the main front runner, probably because he's had a lot of general success compared to everybody else. Wow. Yeah, he's had a lot of success compared to everyone else there. Like in the most recent midterm election, he ran to be governor in Georgia. And this is where the debate is, in Georgia. And long story short, he was almost going to cause like a runoff. So he was talked about in the news because he was having enough of a percentage that he could disrupt the election from like the natural way it would usually go. So I think he's really still the front runner as far as like the main person besides maybe any of the Mises Caucus people directly. But Lars started to gain a lot of attention in this debate, partly because of that. And then the only other thing I'll say here is with COVID, as we discussed on the first podcast with Mike, your medical choices are your medical choices. It doesn't matter what you have to say about it or what you think about it. You shouldn't have to justify it like this. But the people who are extreme, well, not extreme, just more right of the Libertarian Party, like the far right of the Libertarian Party, so to speak. And I don't necessarily mean like the showman or the, not shaman, not the showman, shaman or any of those QAnon type of conspiracy people. I just mean the far right of the party. They basically say if you couldn't see through the BS of the COVID regime being the ultimate suppressor of the people, causing multiple lockdowns and the forceful vaccinations and all that, if you couldn't see through that as a candidate that's supposed to be anti-government, then your vote should be automatically ignored. Is kind of the perspective they have there. And I don't know if I necessarily totally agree with that. I can see the perspective in some ways, but it does seem a little bit extreme.
Joe Jorgensen or whoever the nominee is going to be, just to get 1-2% in the general, and then everybody's going to forget about you. No, who cares about that? So Chase makes fun of me for just known as being a podcaster, but look, I think we can reach people that way. We can reach people by making them laugh. That's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you.
And where's your website?
Yeah, thank you. So, real quick, a little background. I grew up with an outhouse and no electricity on a pot farm in Big Sur, California. And I went on to found multiple internet companies, the largest of which was a company called Friend Finder Networks. It was dating websites. I grew that to 600 employees doing $350 million a year in sales. I sold that company in 2007. Look, the Libertarian Party has a messaging and fundraising problem. Okay, it's not that our messaging isn't bold enough. It's not that our messaging isn't principled enough. It's that we're not reaching enough people with a regular message that resonates with regular people out there. That's what my campaign is about. I picked 5 pieces of policy that resonate with the most Americans, that fix problems that Americans have: their healthcare, the economy, the criminal justice system, our rigged voting system. Go to lars24.com, where I have a huge policy team that has put together over 30 pieces of policy with white papers on how we're actually going to unrig the system. You all have the power to unrig the system. I need you all to show up in Washington, D.C. for me and vote for me as a delegate so that I can win the nomination and bring our message of liberty to the most Americans ever reached.
Thank you, Mr. Mapstead.
So that is Lars in the end of that. And there is another video after this, but I think I'm going to save that to the individual video and grab some clips from that. So we're not going to watch it here. This was generally just a video about the presidential debate. So that is that. So, since I'm getting a little bit tired, it has been a long day of with research. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts about Lars and what you think about him. I do think he is a rather interesting candidate for sure, and I think I would put him over Mike as of now, which is our previous candidate we covered. But I don't know if he's necessarily the outright favorite. But let's go ahead and spin the wheel to see who we will be discussing next time on the Libertarian Spin the Wheel. We are going to be discussing Joshua Smith. So Joshua Smith is going to be our candidate we will be discussing on our next Libertarian Spin the Wheel. And those of you who can see the video description, you can check out the video that I found of Lars if you want more of a look into Lars. It is by Free the People, and they had Lars Mapstead on that little podcast of theirs, and I thought it was a pretty good podcast. But I will go ahead and leave that off for now because we are going to be just discussing the libertarian debate as we just finished with that. So, long story short, thank you for everybody who stopped on by or is going to watch this in the future. That is it for today's episode, and we will be talking about Joshua Smith on our next Libertarian Spin the Wheel.